Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how I program to detect when a video console is on and automatically set that source inside Control4. This is a very cool feature. Let's get started. First, we need to understand the concept behind what we are going to program. This is a very simple schematics about what in case is a game console, a PlayStation, but it could be any game console or even other devices that are like DOMs that you don't have an IP control or IR control directly. Um, and you can apply this concept that we are going to study here. Well, we have the TV. In this case, they are connected by an HDMI cable, of course. And the PlayStation, of course, needs to be plugged in power outlets. What we are going to do basically is use a smart plug that obviously needs to be Control4 compatible somehow with the driver. Could be a Control4 official driver or third-party developer driver, and must have power metering because we are going to measure the consumption of the console, and depending on the values, we are going to trigger some programming. So that is mandatory in this case. It could be a smart plug with power consumption metering, but also I'm seeing, for example, using like normal power outlets, and those power outlets are controlled by a Control4 Zigbee keypad switch, for example, and that those one also has power consumption metering. So well, it's up to you, depending of what are the chances for your case. But we need to make sure to have power metering and be able to have compatible with Control4. Another thing we need to understand before continue is how the power consumption behaves in the device. Basically, I have a focus on game console because I think it's a more cool feature, but could be other devices that are dumb from the Control4 perspective that we don't have any control of IP or IR, and we can apply this same concept. But let's focus on the game console. Nowadays, almost every device has a minimum power, like a standby power consumption, because well, they are of, on, of course, and they have some process running, um, and well, we have power standby that is the minimum value that we could consider, and obviously it's greater than 0 watts. When we turn on the console, for example, with the joystick, in this moment, we are going to see an increase of the power consumption. And if the console was completely without any game opened in like in the background, something like that, we're going to find like the power on minimum value, that is the one that the console has less resources at the same time, so it's like the minimum power. And obviously when we start the game, we are going to have more power because obviously that involves more resources to the gaming console, so well, we have a greater value. But the two values that are important for us is these two, the power standby and the minimum power that we can consider that the PlayStation or the game console is on. Between these two values, we're going to define a power threshold value that from this value sorry, that from above this value, we are going to consider that the console is on. And below this value, we are going to consider that the console is in idle mode or in standby mode. Okay. I have been doing this for quite some projects, and I have realized that the very good value of this is around 80% of the power on minimum value. Um, why? is this a good value? Because if we are very close to the power on minimum value, in reality, this is not a very straight curve. They has a little bit of ripple, so this is are not constant values. So if we are very close to the power on minimum, we can see some bad behaviors, or that takes too long to trigger the scene that we are going to trigger. Um, and for the other hand, if we go near the power standby value, we could have false triggering if, for example, the game console at night start making some update that consume a little bit more of resources. We can be above this threshold, and the programming could be executed. So it's a very good starting point, the 80% of this value. I will suggest you to try to define these two values, or at least this value precisely as possible, then apply the 80%, and then we you should run some tests with the programming we are going to see. And if you feel, for example, that the Control4 takes too long sometimes to trigger the scenes, that means that you are very close to the power on minimum, so you should go a little bit lower than the previous value that you choose. And for other hand, if you start to see that randomly sometimes the game console starts to turn on in Control4 app without anyone turn on from the joystick, that means that you are very low value. You need to go a little bit more higher to avoid that. In my case, for example, I have a PlayStation 4, that is the one we are going to showcase. And I have realized that the power on minimum is 45 watts. The standby power value is around 6 watts. And I have been used 35 watts as power threshold and have been working perfectly. Please remember this value, that is the one we are going to use in the programming stage. Before continue, if you are enjoying this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel. This way you help me to reach more people that could be interested with this kind of content. Thank you. Well, now let's start to making the programming. First, let me show you a little bit the devices that I have here, so you can understand a little bit more better my current setup. We have a Sony TV that is controlled by IR. Then we have a Sony PlayStation 4 driver. This, please don't confuse. This driver is not a control driver, but only is a driver with an icon from the user interface, and you can choose if it has some kind of audio video selection. So if we go to connections tab, we can see that I have connected the HDMI of this dummy driver to the HDMI number 3 of the TV. Basically, this driver, for one hand, allows you to select from the source, the PlayStation, and for the other hand, tell to Control4 that the PlayStation is connected with the HDMI 3 of the Sony TV. So that's it. That's the reason of this driver. It doesn't do anything more than that. And then we have the plug, and Shelly plug, that is a smart plug with energy metering. This is a driver that I have made for myself for using in my home. I have several Shelly devices. I really like them. And well, I have developed this driver that basically, depending of the type of Shelly, it pulls all the information in real time. And one thing that I would like to tell you, that this driver already has a feature that you can define from what value of power you want to trigger something. So it's the power exceed the 35 value, it will trigger an action that you can program, of course, and the same with the lower. But this kind of logics relies on the driver per se. So it could be that I think, in fact, there are some driver that has this feature, but there are others that they don't have this feature. So in order to give you tools to basically be able to program what we are going to program in any driver, or a wide range of drivers, we are not going to use this, but we are going to use other way. That is a little bit more tricky. We need to consider some things, but it's more likely that you could use it in almost every driver. So let's start with the programming. We are going to go to the programming tab here, and we are again on the plug driver. If we go to this plus icon, we are going to see all the variables of this driver. As you can see here, we have the power in watts, a variable of the driver, and we are going to program against this value. Why? Because almost any device that is capable of measuring power is probably going to have this variable. And that way, you are not forced to look for the feature I have built in my driver. So let's go with in this way. So we are going to go basically to the variable we want, and you can see here that the event is when power in watts change, what we want to do. So when it change, first we need to make a comparison uh, considering the value that we defined that was 35 watts. So the first thing we could think is, okay, let's do this. If I will go to the variable, if the variable is greater or equal to 35, we here we can trigger the Control4 scene of the PlayStation. So basically, we can go to living. We go to the room and select. We want to change the select a video device, and here we can find the Sony PlayStation 4. Go there, done, perfect. We have the programming. It's true that this is going to work at first sight, but we could experience some issues with only programming this way. First is that this programming is going to be executed every time that this value changes. Currently, the Shelly device, I think they update their values like in 3 or 4 seconds. So every 3 or 4 seconds, this value is going to check the variable, and if it's greater, it's going to trigger this source in the room. So if the first time it's going to work okay, as we decided, but then if we are still playing the game or using the video console, every time that the updates and is equal or greater than 35, it's going to trigger again and again and again. So for one side, we are going to have um, too much communications or too much commands across Control4, unnecessary because we need to trigger it once we are playing the game. We don't want to Control4 continue sending to itself to trigger the source. That is one of the things of the disadvantage of doing this. This is not a very big issue, but could be a little bit of it could be not good for Control4. But the other thing that is worse, from my opinion, is that, for example, that you turn on the PlayStation, you start playing a little bit, you need to update the PlayStation or the game, and you want to watch Netflix. Meanwhile, the PlayStation is updating. What's going to happen? You are going to go to the remote control, you are going to select Netflix, for example, and the source is going to be changed. But When the device pulls again the data and measure the value and check that it's greater or equal to 35, it's going to set again the PlayStation source as source in the room. So we don't want this behavior. I would recommend not to use this way. So how can we avoid having this issue? Well, we need to use, for example, a variable. Uh, if we go to agents tab, we go to variables tab. If you don't have it, you can add it from here. And we are going to create a variable called, for example, PlayStation 4 was in standby, and we are going to select a boolean. Okay, so with this variable, basically what we are going to do is to track when the PlayStation comes from in a standby mode. So in order to this match the reality, currently, as we saw, the PlayStation is in standby mode. So here we can select to true. So we set the initial value to true to match the reality. So let's go back where we were, basically in preset 4, power, wait, power, what's, change. Okay, so the idea with the variable is to use it only when we come from in standby mode and go to a on status of the PlayStation. So to do that, we are going to use Control4 variables that basically we can find it here, and we can search for is here. PlayStation 4 was in standby. So we are going to execute this routine or this command only if we come from in standby mode. So um, we put the if conditional inside the other if, and we put the trigger. Perfect. It's going to happen is that now we are in true, basically, because now we are in a ill mode. So when I start the console, we are going to be greater from to 35. And he will ask, okay, the variable is true. Yes, because currently we are in true mode. So it's going to trigger the source. Uh, After triggering the source, what we need to do is to set this variable in false in order to, when it pulled again the new data, won't execute this part of the conditional. So basically we go again to the variable, we set to false, and we go there that way. So as you can see, what it's going to do is basically it's going to be greater than 25. It will ask if this variable is true. If it's true, that means we come from a standby mode. We select the source and we set it false. So 3 seconds later, when it pulls again the value, it's going to ask if greater of 35, it will be true, and it will ask again if the variable of PlayStation 4 was in standby. It's going to be false, so this part is not going to be executed again. But in order to reset this variable, we need to think the opposite situation. So we can use these else commands to add a new conditional. So when the power value is greater or equal to 35, we're going to execute this. But if it less of 35, what we are going to do is consider the PlayStation in a standby mode. So we are going to set this variable again to true. So this is very simple, but as you can see, basically this way we make sure that the execution of the command is going to be triggered only when we come from standby mode to console on consideration. That is basically about the threshold value. Basically, that's it. This works perfect. This is the mindset we need to think about when we program this kind of things. But we can add some extra things that it will help you, or at least in my project, it has been very useful. If you have push notifications, we will add a new push notification. That's going to add new. PlayStation 4 was uh, on on by joystick. Perfect. So we are going to set it like comfort. And I will suggest you, for example, because this is not an alarm or an alert, I will put it in info. I will select informal. And for example, in some when I work with a customer project, if I can, I set the informant's notifications only to troubleshooting or to check a specific configuration like this. And I will put as subject PlayStation 4 turned on by joystick. And we can save it. So what's the idea with this? We come again to this event, and we are going to trigger the push notification every time this action is triggered. Why? Because if you are trying to fine tune the threshold value, this could be very useful for the tech. For example, if one night the PlayStation, you wake up or you go to the project and you realize that the PlayStation was on, uh, we can track a little bit when it was. In fact, we can add more information if you want. So it could be very useful to define this value better, for example. So I will suggest you to use this for a couple of days or weeks, and once this behaves perfectly every time you want to trigger and you don't have any like false positives, you can remove or you can disable this item, and that's it. You have the PlayStation up and running when you want from the joystick. Before finish, I would like to clarify something. Almost always, I use this programming only for turn on the room, not to turn it off. Uh, why? Because first, is very cool the turn on feature, and not so cool the turn off feature. um, Second is because sometimes the go going to the standby power consumption takes a few seconds or several seconds, so you have those delay. I usually change the source or turn off the room with voice control or something like that. I don't usually feel um, the needs of having the turn off automated. And another thing is, for example, you could experience if you program with a turn off and you change the source, you need to be careful to program it very good, because if not, you maybe change the source and then the PlayStation a couple seconds later go to a standby mode and turn off the room that you were watching other thing. So from in my opinion, this is very cool. This is easy to do and it's enough. Also, you have seen that in my place, when you execute this, you have like a scene and some other features that basically I don't program them against this event, but when I select the PlayStation 4 from any way. So this include obviously this triggering, but also when I select it from the user interface. So that is another that kind of programming I do it only when you select in the source. I hope this video has been useful for you. If so, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe to my channels. I'm going to upload more videos like this, so if you subscribe plus you click in the notification bell, you're going to receive any news about my channel. Also, leave any comment if you have any doubt or any topic you would like me to develop in future video. Hope to see you soon.